All right.
All right.
We're going.
All right. Welcome to the Unifying Force. I'm Cat, joined by Gio. How are you today?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
All right. We're going into celebration soon, and we're now here to talk about the first quarter of Star Wars for 2023. Uh, we've had a few news articles pop up that are of significance, and we've got a couple series: Bad Batch, Mandalorian.
Yeah,
How are you liking Bad Batch, Gio?
I think it's incredible from like a visual and technical standpoint, and I really think it's an improvement on season one in terms of giving us some good character moments. Um, I'm enjoying it. Yeah, it's and I think Lucasfilm Animation's really strong right now, which we can talk a little bit more about uh, ahead in the show. How
Yeah,
you
all this
find?
stuff with Crosshair has been really great.
Oh, I
Like,
think he's yeah,
yeah, his characters and the stuff they're doing with the clones, and you're seeing just the amount of racism towards the clones and how that whole thing is going. And it's like, okay, they're doing a good job at trying to explain the logic as to why the Emperor is getting rid of his wholesale army for, for pittance.
yeah,
I mean, not that he should keep it. I mean, there's still no logic to get rid of it, but they're trying to create that within the story. But it's
yeah,
really good so far. I mean, I still don't really care much for the episodes with the actual Bad Batch in it. I think the
yeah.
Crosshair stuff is a lot better, but
Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah, of course, we're talking specifics. The whole tipping point episode that we've had this week, and seeing Crosshair's kind of multi-layered character work in that. He's just it's fascinating because obviously he had the horrific villainous turn at the beginning of season one, and season one finished with the ultimate betrayal on Camino, and he let the batch go really, and now you're seeing the character moments and the episodes that focus on him do seem a lot stronger.
yeah.
um
And further
it's
emphasizing the mistake of letting him go at the end of season one, which was just bad writing. He's like, no, you can't let Crosshair. He's like, you know what he's gonna do. It's like, and he's still off doing it.
yeah,
But yeah, so that stuff is really strong and fantastic that they've been diving into that. I can't say the same for the Mandalorian. I feel that it's kind of meandering along. It's like the first episode was let's check in on everybody. Second episode was it's kind of cool to see the nuclear winter that was left behind on Mandalore with the Morlocks and the literal blood sucking cyborgs, which was pretty cool.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but even that episode ended rather abruptly, like right when they got out of the water, because they had the glimpse of the mythosaurs, like hard cut to black. And so the third episode felt more like an episode of Andor because they did this whole Dr. Pershing storyline where we're seeing the how asinine the New Republic bureaucracy is. Like, oh, if it's Imperial technology, we can't possibly recycle it, or if
yeah.
or
Let's just disuse years of what worked well.
yeah,
Yeah,
let's demilitarize the Rebel Alliance. It's like, okay, so you're doing a post World War One parallel with the League of Nations, and then you're doing a post World War Two parallel with the whole denazification program for the Imperial officers like Pershing and them. And I thought it was interesting that they don't have names; they just have serial numbers, but they're still allowed to wander around Coruscant and have somewhat free reign, which is kind of interesting. It's almost like they're trying to
yeah,
say, we're not going to treat you like bad people. We think you're great. Come look at our culture, how wonderful it is.
yeah.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was interesting because on the one hand, it felt like a almost fever dream of Coruscant in a way, in that you were exploring these bright lights and this kind of sleek underground, but not, 1313 level down underground with the underbelly, and what you saw in Attack of the Clones with the streets, and just how sleek and um that kind of that futuristic look that we know Coruscant always had, but you just see those digital shots or the model shots of the city center itself, and you don't see, like how it actually is to be on. We're just walking around, being a pedestrian, taking the sights, and being a tourist almost. And I thought that was interesting to see that aspect because it's world building, and that's what we want. We want to see and feel like the world is expansive, and we're getting new new visual and auditory things to take in, and then also having the insight with Dr. Pershing and the fact that he's trying to kind of fit back in. He's being rehabilitated into society. Um, and yet they're still going with those numbers. It did really feel a bit jarring. Like, what? It's just going to be referred to by codes.
Plus,
That
you
that was
also
one of the
get to
problems
see,
with the clones.
yeah, and you also get to see how lazy they are because it's like he has to go talk to that droid every day, kind of like that Blade Runner 2049 thing. With like, I was just waiting for them to say interlinked. It's like just say that already. But it's like the droid couldn't read his emotions, and it was clear that he didn't really mean most of what he was saying. But it's
Yeah,
like you can just lie to the robot and it doesn't make a difference. It's like somebody thought, okay, this might be a good idea, but we're not going to make sure to program the robot to be able to understand human emotion to know whether or not he's lying, or we're too lazy to have an actual person give these interviews, you know?
yeah,
Uh, so there's that going on. I was surprised they spent 45 minutes on that, given that usually they spend like half an hour on a Mandalorian story, maybe 35, but to spend 45 minutes on just Pershing, which I feel this is probably his final episode, given his memory wipe at the end.
it
And
does
how
seem
he,
that way. I wish that it almost built up his character so well within the episode. I felt that it
yeah,
would be a shame to get rid of him and to not see him, because that the actor Ahmed Tabriz has been fantastic in the moments that we saw him in season one, and with this kind of ongoing cloning storyline, it would be a shame
yeah.
to see him discarded.
Because unless there's a way to, because he didn't seem to know exactly what his research was being used for. Because when he gave the speech at the opera house, and I like that they went back to the opera house from Revenge of the Sith, that was cool. But he's given
Yeah,
the speech saying, "Oh, my work was co-opted by evil people." It's like, do you really know the extent of what they were doing? And I'm guessing not, because otherwise he probably would have told them about it. But I was watching that, and I could see the ending coming a bit because the girl playing the agent wasn't that convincing. It's like, I mean, not convincing in terms of hiding that she's got an ulterior motive here. It's like he's falling for this way too easily. It's like, dude, you got to scale it back a bit. So it's like that
yeah,
was there, and then I assume that it was Gideon who sent the fleet of fighters to destroy Bo-Katan's home. That just seems to be a given. And I was kind of surprised going into the fourth episode that she's not really curious anymore as to who destroyed her house or why. She was smart enough to know that that was too big of a fleet to just come out of nowhere. Like there's something about that.
yeah.
But
Mm.
she's just kind of hanging out here, and she doesn't really care about that anymore. And nobody cares that Din has the dark saber. Like nobody wants to challenge him for it, which is kind of surprising. And
Mm.
the idea that this giant pterosaur just snuck up on them like that, and oh, it's taken children before. I'm like, what? It's taken children before, and you didn't prioritize taking care of this already?
You didn't have
Uh,
lookouts for it or sentries. Yeah,
yeah, it's just
it's yeah.
it's like Land of the Lost here, It's like that kind of goofy monsters show up and kidnap, and of course, because they don't want the audience to turn against them, we have to have them adopt the three baby chicks at the end. And I'm wondering, maybe if they have a growth spurt early enough, we'll see Paz Vizsla, Bo-Katan, and the armor riding them, while Din could be riding the Mythosaur at some point. That would be great.
That
Uh,
would be a visual sight to take in. Yeah.
it was kind of interesting when Bo-Katan did tell the armor about it. First, she's like, "Oh, well, that's just a vision." She's like, "No, I actually saw it." She's like, "Oh, people usually see things when they're in the waters." No, I saw it. And the armor at that point seems to believe her, but she doesn't really care. It's like, okay, because I guess the armor, she believes the Mythosaur exists, so it's not a big deal to her. And I thought that was going to be like a big thing, and maybe it would be if Bo-Katan tells Din Djarin about it, or if she tells the others, maybe not. So I thought,
Mm.
oh, I thought that was going to be like a big moment, and then she just the armor didn't seem to care.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really tell what's going on because we do have the Mando visors that they've got, so it's taking away a whole aspect of communication. As you were saying before, in the third episode, when you had the Imperial officer betray Dr. Pershing, you could pick up a lot of cues
Yeah,
from her eyes, her mouth, the facial expressions and so on. And it does, I do think, in moments like that, the conversations, which I think are some of the richest parts of the Mandalorian, when they're talking about the culture, the practice, and it's interesting to see them portray that as um a a lost society, but then also one that's kind of trying to survive and be and reemerge. And um yeah, it just is hard to to know, what the armor is thinking. And I
right.
do think it was going to be a huge part. And you do think that they've given us enough nuggets of the mythosaur to know that it's important. It's been referenced a couple of times now over a few seasons as well, all from the armorer. So she is the kind of lore master in this situation. kind of dispensing info to the audience, talking as much to like general audiences as well as the characters within Din and Bo-Katan. So I do see what they're kind of trying to construct, and it would make sense to bring back the mythosaur in a bigger way than what we've
Yeah.
seen.
And then on the other hand, I thought about it, and it's like, well, since Din Djarin believes in the mythosaur also, maybe he wouldn't really be jazzed by hearing it either. He'd just be like, okay, there's a mythosaur down there. There's supposed to be one down there, you know? But it's kind of interesting
Do you think?
because on the one hand, Mandalore, as we see, the reason it's got covered in glass and everything is because it was a nuclear winter, or nuclear holocaust. But it's like there really isn't, like Bo-Katan's kind of right. There really isn't anything you can really salvage there unless there's more Beskar mines or something. But I wonder if the mythosaur is
Right.
a creature that can travel through open space like the Purgle can, and maybe they could travel. It could travel to another planet potentially, because Bo-Katan's planet looks a lot more fertile than Mandalore does, and we haven't been to
Right,
Concordia
it
yet,
does.
where Din Djarin is from. But so it'll be interesting to see if that thread gets picked up again, because that was a great thing at the end of season or episode 2. Like my eyes went wide when I saw this guy make his live action appearance.
Yeah,
I saw
it
the
was.
corner, and just the shape of this was enough to say, oh, that's a mythosaur. Um, so I'll be curious to see how they integrate it back into the story. And then the fact that Grogu has almost like a PTSD type flashback to escaping the temple, which I admit is a really interesting subversion of expectations, because the fact that they kept it secret made everybody think that it must be a major character that saves him, but instead it's a major actor with Ahmed Best, which is just amazing.
Yeah,
Apparently reprising his role from the Jedi Temple Challenge YouTube show,
right.
which I haven't actually seen that yet, so I didn't know he was actually playing a character on that. But that was kind
Yeah,
of neat.
I just heard it's a fantastic way to bring someone back in, isn't it? Especially
Yeah,
when there are lots of things behind the scenes, and then with um just you know uh I guess like fan awfulness and a lot of like toxic hate that he would have had just for portraying a completely CG character, which he did a good job as possible as Jar Jar Binks. There were many issues with why that character did or didn't work for people. And it's a great story to see someone come back like that and have a huge role, because I think knowing that feel good story in the real world behind it makes the impact a lot more. Um,
yeah.
and yeah, although I do wonder if it's not someone that you're aware of because he was portraying a CG character, like you're not familiar with name and face, then it wouldn't matter to you so much. But um, I I guess would you say that's an Easter egg for the longtime fans or the
Well,
um,
yeah,
kind of
because like little kids who
passionate
watch
fans?
the YouTube show will know who he is.
Yeah.
And then Ahmed Best. I mean, at first I didn't recognize him because I thought, is that Ahmed Best? And I couldn't really tell exactly. And then there was some better shots later. I'm like, yeah, that's Ahmed Best. So it is an Easter egg for diehard fans, and the way they shoot that scene where Grogu's going down the elevator and he's watching the lights cue for when he's getting down closer to the
Mm.
bottom floor, and it's like, okay, clearly they're keying up for somebody is going to be opening that door. And when you see that it's him, and at first I didn't recognize him, and it's like, well, and I thought, well, it's got to be Ahmed Best because I went through process of elimination. I'm like, he's the only person who, because it's not a character I recognize. Well, then it's got to be the actor or something. But I thought that was really cool, and the fact that it's Padme's ship that they take off in, the same one from episode 2,
Mm.
that they took from Naboo to Tatooine to Geonosis. And I thought, oh, that's cool because the Naboo people officers were there providing safe haven, and so that has led to the speculation that what if he actually ends up with Jar Jar Binks back on Naboo and hide it? Like that could be kind of cool, fun. Like Ahmed Best handing Grogu over to himself.
And that would be, yeah, real meta humor right there.
Yeah, that'd be pretty
Um,
good. Because by itself, it's
I did,
like we knew somebody had to help Grogu escape the temple. That was a given. But the
yeah.
fact that they didn't take it further, because we still don't know how he goes from here to ending up at that compound where Mandalorian found him at. It's like, and I'm still not clear why he was at that compound. Like, did those pirates or
It's
bounty hunters kidnap him from uh, the Werner Herzog character, the client, and were holding him for ransom? It's like I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
or was he something they stole earlier and Werner Herzog knew about it and thought that's what I need for my insidious
Yeah.
operation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I take it they'll probably eventually reveal that because it went silly. But still looking at these 4 episodes, I don't feel there's a really big narrative drive. I mean, we can see where the story's going. It's like Moff Gideon has escaped. And for that matter, I don't know why they revealed that as like a throwaway line. It's like, how are we not seeing that happen? It's like, come on, he's been in
Yeah.
prison supposedly for 2 years now, because according to Filoni, it's been like 2 years either from either the Book of Boba Fett or the end of season 2.
Yeah.
So in any case, he's been in jail for at least 2 years. It's like, why didn't we get a glimpse of that? And who knows? Maybe next week we'll get a flashback episode focusing on like Gideon. Uh,
Right.
but I would
Who
have
was
really
it?
liked to see that in real time to let that surprise kind of happen.
Who was it that revealed Gideon? Because it was a really throwaway line, wasn't it?
Yeah, they're
The
like, because what happened was Pershing accidentally outed what's her name as being a former employee of Gideon, and the others were kind of shocked by that because they were just like paper pushers compared to
Elia
them.
Kane. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then she mentions that he escaped
Of
for
course.
the
It was,
tribunal.
yeah, it was at the sit down where they had that sort of bench sort
Yeah,
of chit chat in the center of that compound, that
and I thought that would be something
apartment.
that's weird because if you're Dr. Pershing and I'm then again, I'd have to go back and rewatch season 1. I'm not sure if he knew that Gideon was the one who's in charge of the science projects. He was there with a client on Navarro, but I don't recall if he necessarily knew that Gideon was the one running the show, because on
Right.
the Imperial base where they found the Snoke vats, Pershing had a recording there on the hologram, but I can't remember if he was addressing Gideon on that or not, because it seems like if he knows Gideon is involved in the project, then the minute he hears that he's escaped the tribunal, he should be sounding the alarm bells, but
Yeah,
he
that's true.
wasn't. So I'd have to go back and check if he's actually aware of Gideon or if that was just a slip up on the writing, because obviously he would be all over that. Because we can tell even in season 1, even though he's evil in a sense for what he's doing, he's not a bad guy. He's just kind of he's been co-opted into this. He didn't really have a
Dr.
choice.
Pershing. Yeah, yeah.
And
It's kind of
he clearly did try and save Grogu, so he does care. He's just, because you can tell he was being really passionate when he says the reason he wants to continue his research is because he wanted to clone organs, healthy organs to help people. And it's like, okay, so he is a genuinely good person. So if he knew Gideon was involved, he would be doing something about it. So I'm just gonna guess at this point that he didn't know, or if maybe he doesn't really, maybe he's not too familiar with who that guy. I mean, he kind of is, but it's like it's again, that's kind of what I wanted them to go into in the 3rd episode. It's like, if you're gonna spend all this time with Pershing, why don't you answer some questions in terms of how much did Pershing know about what was going on and who was involved? And instead it was kind of, meandering along a bit. So yeah, it's like I bet that Gideon's the one who sent the fighters to destroy Bo-Katan's home. I get that
yeah.
he's the one who put the girl up to setting up Pershing as a patsy to get some of his tech back. But it's like we blink and we're already halfway through the season, and the so-called filler episodes in the other seasons were like complete stories and were really good, whereas like this latest one with the Land of
Right.
Lot with the pterosaur and stuff, like the internal story logic doesn't really make sense, because it's like, again, the idea that all those Mandalorians couldn't take down the alligator monster in the first episode was really contrived. It's like, come on, they would do that. And same thing with them not being able to shoot down the pterosaur. Come on,
Do you think that though, or do you think they're kind of protecting what we've seen in the real hero star Mandalorian characters that we've had do the cool stuff, like Jango Fett, like Din Djarin, and they're kind of showing that in a way those kind of hero characters are more skilled, and the kind of regular Mandalorians are kind of more grunts, and so they're not as potent with their weapons, with the and as resourceful. That's kind of what I was thinking, that it's
I
almost like
mean, we did
looking
see
at
them in that brief flashback totally raid that village of the super battle droids, and total badasses. They just took over and saved everybody. And I just kind of like when they say don't fire at the bird because you hurt the child. I'm like, well, if you fly close enough to it, which we saw they were able to,
okay,
like Bo-Katan got right
yeah,
up
sure,
alongside.
on that point, yeah.
It's like just shoot it enough so that it drops him and have the guy catch him right down below. It's like it easy. Uh, but it's, again, they're trying to. I get it. The story is about Bo-Katan being elevated further in the clan, because when they get to
Yeah,
the when they have the campfire and they say, no, you could stay by the fire because you're leading the hunting party and you arranged the party and provided the ship, and we respect that. And you can tell when she takes off the helmet that she's like really kind of nervous, because it's like, on the one hand, she doesn't really want to stay here, but the fact that they're starting to like her more, she knows that it's going to make it harder for her to leave.
Right.
But at the same time, she didn't really bring up. I thought she would have pressed the fact with them. It's like, hey, this whole fleet of TIE fighters coming out of nowhere to bomb my home is really odd. Like, there's something awkward going on here. I thought she would push that. So I imagine that once the Mandalorians find out that Gideon's alive, that they're going to make that their mission because he's, responsible for the Night of a Thousand Tears, which I still wonder if we're going to see that in flashback form. But I just kind of
Right.
feel
It
so
would
far
be
the season hasn't spewed out much story uh compared to previous seasons, and I'm like, okay, I just kind
yeah,
of want. I
it's
haven't
give
felt at the end of each episode the pump, like other than the end of the second episode with the Mythosaur, which they haven't really
okay.
paid off yet. And since they put a buzzkill on it by having the armor, like, oh, who cares? It's like I need something that makes me really pumped to see the next chapter, so to speak. I haven't really gotten that out of 3 of the 4 episodes so far.
Right. Did you not get a sort of, I guess, like a pump in a different way? It's not really to do with the Mandalorian as such, but just the kind of Andor-ness of the third episode. The fact that it was a lot more kind of character based and a kind of different story. I think that I think was quite engrossing, and just seeing
Yeah.
Carson from a different view, um and seeing that character's perspective. They're not the sort of Andor style of storytelling in that not really hit for you.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was a shame that they picked Pershing because it's like, again, a character who you wiped its memory at the end. So it's like you did all this character building and then
That was a shame for
kind of got
sure.
rid of it. And it's like, well, maybe you could have picked a different character to do all the character development for, but c'est la
Okay,
vie.
yeah.
Other news we
Or
had
or
was,
maybe he will come back and have retained something, and this is building towards a potential redemption for him in a
yeah,
way,
like,
because you see that there's goodness in him, and that he was kind of
right.
forced to use his technology and his research, um, which was initially something noble and looking to like improve health and help populations and citizens, and kind of for the betterment of society. And then he was more or less having no idea that it would be used for pumping the industrial military complex and furthering the war machine and the efforts of the empire. So I think that I think in isolation, Dr. Pershing is an interesting character, and what we've seen of it in episode 3, I am thinking, on the flip side to what you've said, if he survives that kind of mind flayer and having his memory erased, maybe it'll be something to come back to. That's something that I would like to see, I
Yeah.
guess,
And
in a way.
technically there's still a bit of a loose end there because the other officer left her in the room. She asked permission to stay there. He said yes. They're going to know from, if the screenwriters aren't lazy, they're going to know that based on the outcome of the procedure that somebody cranked the dial up and the fingers are all going to be pointed at her. So if they don't bring that up,
Right.
then that would be lazy writing, because it's like that's another loose end, because now they're going to see that I mean, unless she hightails it out of there, but it seems like she's done a good job at remaining undercover and would want to keep that cover. But I don't know. We'll see where that goes. But so that's season 3 so far. We've had some Star Wars news come out this month. We heard, surprise, surprise, the Damon Lindelof Star Wars movie isn't going to happen. And they hired Stephen Knight, who's a really good screenwriter, to write a Star Wars movie, which gave me the thought, should I start a lottery to see whether or not it's actually going to get made? And number 2, should we start
Right.
a new idea where let's get available screenwriters to write Star Wars movies that we don't necessarily have to make now, but stuff that we can make later or whenever, because it's like a lot of people have said they want to see Star Wars content that continues world building that isn't tied to the Skywalker saga, like things that are totally new, kind of like what Rian Johnson was going to do with his trilogy, which probably isn't going to happen now, and what Taika Waititi was going to do with his movie. And so I thought, well, maybe if you hire Stephen Knight to just write a script like that, like give him a budget parameter, let him write what he wants, and then, put the script on the shelf for when you need it for a rainy day, kind of like what Lucas was doing with the Solo script. He's the one who commissioned the beginnings of that script to try and boost the sale price of Disney to make it look like they had or the sale price of Lucasfilm to Disney, because he wanted to make it seem like they had a script ready to go. Same with Rogue One, because John Knoll pitched Rogue One back in 2006, and
Okay.
that
Yeah.
took 10 years to come to fruition. But it shows that they will bank their ideas for later on. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if they just did that, like hire the best screenwriters around to write, good Star Wars scripts for a rainy day.
Right. Do you, I mean, it would be fantastic if that is a long-term plan, but then is that something that would be released to the media, like in as an official statement? It seems like that's a huge risk to take. But
Yeah,
I like your theory, because that gives us some, hiring good screenwriters is the basis of good storytelling, and then you can get, better, like, better higher level TV and film from Star Wars, and move the franchise forward, and expand it kind of horizontally as well. We want to see the expanded universe, in descriptive terms, as well as using ideas that were fantastic in the EU would be, is such a gigantic backlog of content to use as inspiration, if not to use directly.
yeah. It is a risky idea, but I mean, after that whole Rogue Squadron fiasco, they can't really come back from that. I mean, you hired Patty
Oh,
Jenkins, you
right.
did this whole great video, and it's like, even
So
with
so
after the release of Top Gun Maverick, which was super popular, it's like that's all the more reason to go through with the Rogue Squadron movie. Uh,
exactly. So
and I don't
remind us
understand
what
why
we
that
got.
fell apart.
Yeah. So remind us what we got with Rogue Squadron. We had the announcement officially from Lucasfilm in like maybe
Yeah, we had
2018.
so Patty Jenkins made a video at an Air Force base.
She had the Air Force Base, kind of like talking about her personal connection to,
Yeah, they had the
the
jets
Air
out there, and
Force.
they flew a couple by, and
Yeah.
it was like she was talking about the type of movie it was going to be. I'm like, this sounds really awesome, and I'm like, obviously the president of the company would have had to sign off on this to not only approve
Yeah.
the project but approve this big announcement, and they made such a big deal about it. And as far as I can tell, there's no reason why it's not happening. I mean, now that Patty Jenkins' schedule is opened up with the cancellation of Wonder Woman 3, it's like, well, why not do it? Is it because, I mean, it
Right.
can't be because Wonder Woman 84 wasn't that great. I mean, everybody has a bad day at the office, whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't get why
But
it's not
they,
happening. And I mean,
but
that's kind of part of with so many, the revolving door of people they keep saying they're going to hire and not work out with. It makes me think that, well, I know that European celebrations don't really have a track record for making big announcements, but it's not going to mean anything to me if they do make an announcement, because they've done, like when they mentioned just a few weeks ago that, oh, well, regarding the Donald Glover Lando series, that's dependent on whether he's going to be available or not. It's like, but you already announced it. So obviously the project has been greenlit, and obviously you already had a production schedule, which apparently they didn't. And I think my conspiracy theory that they were just announcing stuff to please the shareholders was correct, because
right.
it's like nothing seems to be going, like, we're coming on over 3 years now with no work on any new Star Wars movie. And I get that you have Favreau and Filoni building the Mandoverse on television, but there's more creative people out there who could easily make great Star Wars movies in tandem with what's going on the small screen for the shows. So I I think
Right.
uh, it won't be until we have new leadership over there. Like, I think the smartest policy would be do what Eon Production does with James Bond, which is you don't make any announcements until the day before principal photography. Like, it doesn't matter what the tabloids out there say or who
I
gets
didn't
the
know that.
scoop.
That makes perfect sense, right? Have
Yeah,
it
like,
absolutely secured and firmed in every way, and
yeah,
then have it from the source.
yeah. So that would be something I would like. Okay, let's wait and see if that's going to happen or not. But I do know the European celebrations sometimes have some good panels. They had that really great Clone Wars panel in 2016, where Dave Filoni detailed a bunch of the stuff that he was going to do had the show not been canceled, and stuff that I wish he was able to revisit, because I still don't get the logic. And like, they greenlit season 7, which tells me that the studio recognized and Disney recognized that, oh, the show was really popular, we shouldn't have canceled it. It's like, well,
Yeah.
then why not let him finish Clone Wars as he intended, rather than, you know, forcing him into Bad Batch so quickly. It's like, let him finish Clone Wars as he wanted, and because there were like, I think he said there were like 65 episodes left or something, or at least 65 episodes they'd already written, and maybe a 10 or 20 more that they were gonna write to pad out the series. So it's, I don't know. I'm curious now with Iger coming back, if how much stuff is gonna change, if anything. 'Cause I've been hearing the rumors that Kennedy might retire in the months after Indiana Jones. And if that happens, I don't know
Right.
who they would get next, but I think that kind of needs to happen at this point, because you have too much of a track record of not being on the same page with your talent, making announcements of things that aren't even remotely set in stone, not
Yeah.
being able to get the house in order, and it's like, this isn't working. So that's kind of where that's at. So that's why, like,
I
yeah,
do
I
see
want to get
that.
excited for Celebration, but I think the exciting part of Celebration is going to be just the panels and, the vendors and the guests, as opposed to any big announcements. Because I mean, frankly, I can't really buy into anything they're announcing unless they show a trailer for something which proves that it's done. And then
Right.
I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss.
Yeah, to be honest, I've always taken the the evidence of a trailer being that's when something is absolutely coming our way and to be released. So I have always taken the kind of there's a lot of like rumor mill stuff, and then there are kind of the more established sources online that that you, I guess, would trust a little more in terms of reporting these things. And then there's the actual company itself and what they put out. And I think the entire PR stuff has been pretty, um, uh, they kind of flubbed it quite a lot with all these projects going on. And that's why we have these issues happening with a lot of these projects going on, that they start and then we're teased with something and then it's taken away. And just getting back to your point on Patty Jenkins, because I think the Rogue Squadron idea for a film is fantastic, and that's always been my line, that with the impact that Top Gun Maverick had in terms of getting people back to the big screen, to theaters, to cinemas, and to enjoy that, and also just that kind of entire action theme. There's that almost the other strand you mentioned, in that sometimes it seems like Lucasfilm or Disney get shaky when somebody has a badly received film. So we saw that with you know that's been the case with DB Weiss and the Game of Thrones showrunners, right? As soon as that the final season was kind of collapsing in on itself, and there was a lot of audience unhappiness, big fan unhappiness, and critic unhappiness with it. It was as if they just whisked that entire idea of new Star Wars films away completely. We saw that with Colin Trevorrow, right? He had a film that wasn't too well received, and then it was like, nope, let's take him out of the equation for being a Star Wars film director. So, it does. I think it's
I think you're right about that too, because I remember Lucasfilm's official
it
statement on
it
why
does
DB
feel like
Weiss
that.
left was because, oh, well, they signed a deal with Netflix and they were supposed to stay with Lucasfilm. And I'm thinking, is that the reason they left, or is it they figured out after having enough meetings and signing it that they weren't going to have as much control as they thought, or this wasn't really going to work out, and Lucasfilm got scared and they decided, nope, we're just going to go to Netflix instead. And I'm wondering if that might be what happened, and then they just put a different spin on it. So I think you're
Right.
right.
Like
I
a
think
yeah.
I think it is like, I mean, the Colin Trevorrow script was amazing. Not perfect, but much better than Rise of Skywalker. I still don't know why. Like
Did
the
you
statement that people were saying was, "Oh well, it was difficult to work with blah blah." I'm like, "Bull! You worked with him for over 2 years. It wouldn't take you that long to realize that this isn't working." So I think you're right about that too. It's like he had a movie that wasn't well received. They got cold feet. They kicked him out. Um, but that was a great script, and it's like,
where did you find the script for that? The
there have been people reading who've got a hold of it, who were doing breakdowns of it on YouTube. I'm not sure if those videos are still available, but it was
right.
reading about it, and they were going over the script points, and I'm like, this is really good. Um, but I think you're right. I think it was them getting cold feet over, because it was around the same time that he had that other film come out, when because they didn't make the announcement until like I think September or whatever, that he was leaving and JJ was coming back, but it turns out that he had actually been fired all the way back in June. And so it's like, okay,
Yeah,
I could see how they're not really jiving on this. And so uh, I think that's a part of it. So they need somebody running the company who's not going to be afraid because somebody has one bad day at the office.
exactly. That kind of the whole it's not just cold feet, but then almost treating it as like an iceberg in front of the Titanic, and you just think it's a sinking ship, and they throw everyone overboard. That's kind of how it feels when they've got like a director, writers, and it's just no, let's tip them off. You could say that that's the situation I think potentially with Patty Jenkins and what happened to the Wonder Woman 84. I think that could be a similar situation. It's a case of one bad film. We're already really uncertain, that is Lucasfilm, so we'll just tip them off because we're so afraid of maybe the brand being damaged by this person having a bad run at a film. And it is so, it just feels so juvenile and so naive.
Yeah, and the idea when it comes to damaging the brand, it's like you already did that with the sequel trilogy because you didn't, you know, come up with an actual story or a through line for, like, nobody asked
Yeah,
in episode 7, why is the Skywalker saga continuing in this way? Like, what part of the Skywalker saga in the first two trilogies was incomplete? And they never really answered the question in episode 7 of what that is. It's like, well, just
oh,
I mean,
within
the
the film
title may as well
itself.
be, yeah,
Yeah.
the title The Force Awakens may as well translate to Star Wars is back. And it's like, see,
Yeah,
like that ship has sailed already in terms of damaging the brand. It's like, you gotta, it's like, let's move past this and just start making good movies again. Uh,
yeah,
it's not rocket science in terms of, because they have so much material to draw from, which I know George Lucas didn't tell Kennedy about that because he was never a fan of it. But it's like you still have so many things, like a Darth Bane trilogy. Even that would be a great way to
yeah,
win back a lot of the fan base. Knights of the Old Republic, or stuff like that, like or a Darth Plagueis adaptation. I mean, the fact that Ian McDiarmid is still game to do this stuff, it's like, go, by all means, do it. Like, make a Darth Plagueis miniseries, Disney Plus miniseries with Ian McDiarmid and your de-aging technology, or have him be Palpatine. It would be amazing, so I just don't understand, which is why the part of conventions I'm excited for is seeing the other fans, the vendors, and the merchandise and the guests that they bring. But as far as
right.
announcing new stuff, it's like, I mean, it's
Yeah, you gotta take it with a heap of salt at this point for sure. But I think it's the idea of like a Plagueis miniseries with Palpatine is fantastic. But every time I think of the de-aging, I just think uh I was revisiting the Book of Boba Fett and saw the episode where he's Din revisits Yavin 4 and Luke and the construction of the temple, and it was a massive improvement on season 2 finale of The Mandalorian. The technology they used, but still it was so ropey, and you know what they modulated with Mark Hamill's voice with the sound mixing at times was all right, but at other times it was pretty jarring. And I am thinking that I I, I would like to see Star Wars film or TV that has new characters, because I think that the even if the technology was fantastic, I'm not sure if they would spend enough time creating a good story unless they do a straight adaptation, for example, of Plagueis. Um,
yeah.
but then there's always that idea of adapting an why adapt a storyline straight from the original to film or screen? Because
Which is something Lucasfilm is very averse to doing as well. They don't like repeating themselves, but it's like, I think you're at a point where you kind of need to do that to right the ship.
right, what makes you say they're averse in what sense
Well,
of
they've made
adaptating?
statements before when people have asked them about that, and they say they don't really like repeating themselves in terms of, like, if the story is already out there, they don't want to repeat the same story again, even though they had no problem doing that with the sequel trilogy, with the whole, it's poetry, it rhymes,
All right.
but they don't like doing straight up adaptations of things they've already published. And which is probably also why she's like, Kennedy had said they didn't have anything to draw from, because, oh, we don't want to repeat ourselves, so we're not going to go to this. It's like, well, no, go to the source books, do something. And like, the story group doesn't really do anything. clearly they don't have any authority. They just talk their way into having jobs. And it's, it's
Right.
like a con job in a way, it's like, okay, uh, Pablo Hidalgo was just a consultant at Lucasfilm under Lucas, but then he talked his way into a job when Kennedy took over, exploiting the fact that she didn't really know as much about the lore as he did. But then they clearly don't have any authority when it comes to the movies, and there's not as much consistency anymore, even between the novelizations of the movies. And so it's like a house
Right.
in disarray. So it's like, yeah, I'll go to Star Wars Celebration. I'm not this year, but I love Star Wars Celebration. That is a really great thing to rile up the fans and make it really exciting stuff that you get to do. But I mean, I am curious as to what Favreau and Filoni have in mind after they finish this Mando crossover. Because Favreau recently said,
Yeah.
I think as early as last week in an interview, when he was asked, "Oh, how long is this Mandalorian series going to go on for?" And you could tell he was being a bit evasive because he didn't want to give an exact number. Because we heard rumors it was going to go as far as 7 seasons, but he said that,
Oh,
oh well, as
it's
long as
not
the
going to
fans
happen.
like it, we'll keep giving it to them. So I thought, okay, so I mean, maybe stick to however many seasons is necessary to tell the story is what it should be. It's like, don't arbitrarily drag it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't
That's
put a bunch of padding. It's like, I get that ratings are great and you want to keep renewing stuff, but I think fans are going to be more excited about stories that are good. I don't think they care whether they're long. It's like if it's like for instance the upcoming TV series for Peacock about the Continental from the John Wick universe. It's only 3 episodes, but each episode is going to be 90 minutes. And it's going to tell like its own little trilogy as its own story done. And it's like, okay,
oh
that's the
well.
idea. Plan it out from the
That's
beginning and do it that way. Like they showed the High Republic video where they planned this all out from the beginning, which is good for the publishing side, but on the film and TV side, well, I mean, on the film side, there's really nothing going on because even it's been like 2 years since they announced the Taika Waititi thing, and recently Taika said he still hasn't even started thinking about it, which means that it's probably not going to happen. So it's like,
yeah. Do you think he's got the passion to do a Star Wars film? Do you think that he's a fan enough, or do you think he's wanting to have his own creative ideas and do his own version
I,
of film? Because a lot of his early stuff was, kind of that kind of independent, free
well,
thinking kind of voice of film.
I think
And
that's kind of
yeah,
why he said he wanted to do something that was detached from the rest of the Star Wars lore, like something somewhere else in the corner of the galaxy.
yeah,
But if
and
they're
it
not going to
makes
give him
sense.
free reign to do what he does best, then maybe he might change his mind. But I don't know. He still has that other movie coming out, that soccer film. I can't remember the name, but it's been finished for a while. It's just been getting these delays. But I'm not sure if he's doing another project before then. So
Right.
I mean,
He
that's
might.
if they had a Q&A at Celebration, I would get in line and I'd say, "Hey, where's the Rogue Squadron movie?" It's like, let's bring that back.
Yeah,
That would be
yeah.
awesome. I mean,
It
plus
it would be
they made
incredible.
that announcement around the time that they like 2 months after they put out that new Rogue Squadron game, which was excellent. It's like you pumped everybody up with this
Oh,
game.
Star Wars Squadrons. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was fantastic. And it's like, okay, you've
They
gotten everybody excited about this portion of the IP. Let's cash in on it. Uh, I know the sequel trilogy didn't really have that many space battles, but the one or two there were looked really good. And this
yeah,
the modern CG and everything. It's like, let's bring that back to like Star
right.
Wars needs that again. Because the
Well, that
Mandalorian, it's like, yeah, it's good, but you could tell that the effects aren't up to, so the CG isn't as up to snuff as you would have if it was a theatrically released thing.
I was going to say though that I thought it was really well shot what they did in The
Yeah.
Mandalorian.
But
Bringing
yeah,
back
the
a space
shot
battle,
framing composition is nice.
it was fantastic. It was, simple, pared back, easy to follow, well lit, which is
Mhm.
sometimes a problem with TV shows. Sometimes,
Yeah.
you people complain about, and I thought they did a fantastic job in the space battle that we saw with, first, uh, in the first chapter of season 3 with the pirates. I know the storyline was a bit kind of, whoa, what's going on here? But seeing Din maneuver around was fantastic in that N1 starfighter, and then seeing how skillful Bo-Katan is when she was defending um, her her castle being left in ruins by the TIE bombers was also fantastic, really well shot. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would have rendered the CG a bit more, but so that's something else that hasn't come back in Mandalorian yet. I take it that Pirate is going to show up again at some point, because that was like a random. It's like, oh, okay, there's pirates here. Yeah, he's going to come back, but so, and we still don't. I think maybe one announcement which might be good for Celebration is if they'll announce like a release date for Ahsoka, and maybe they'll put out a trailer. That could be something that I think they could do, because they've already. I believe they finished filming by now. I'm not sure how many seasons Ahsoka's going to be, but I would think that
Yeah.
that's something that's closer to being in the can, that they could have a trailer for it. I haven't heard any real predictions, but I think that would be my big prediction for Celebration.
There's a
Like, we know
big
that-
there's a Saturday panel that's dedicated just to Ahsoka.
Ahsoka.
So
that's
Mandalorian doesn't even have its own panel. They're part of Lucasfilm Showcase. Ahsoka has full hour Saturday morning panel.
Okay, that makes sense then, because
Yeah.
I know they were filming that and then
I was
near
gonna say.
done. So that's the only announcement that I'm gonna be. I could put all my chips on the table and say, okay, that's happening, because that's done.
Yeah, that's going to be a massive thing, because Ahsoka's
yeah.
a really loved character. You've seen her develop so well from being, that's a character created by George Lucas and Dave Filoni, and then seen the development through the Clone
Yeah.
Wars. So there's a lot of good feelings and goodwill from
Yeah.
fans, as well as I think Ahsoka's been involved in some of the best storylines in Star Wars, in her arc at the end of the initial run of the Clone Wars in season 5, and then the Siege of Mandalore to finish season 7. That was chef's kiss. It was such a fantastic bow to wrap up the Clone Wars, and that was a huge gift. And I think it's sometimes easy to feel a little bit jaded with like the behind the scenes stuff and what's going forward, but we have had some really good really powerful stories successfully done in the kind of last couple of years by Lucasfilm with Disney, doing everything and running the show. But yeah, I would say that Ahsoka is going to be huge, and that's going to be a big focus going forward.
Another couple predictions I have is, since they've already confirmed they're doing a second season of Visions, I wonder if they will have an announcement for who and which studio. If it will be the same studios as last time, or are they going to find new studios and new writers? That would be nice to see. I think that would be a cool announcement, because Visions was something that was mostly positively received, and so that's good news to hear they're doing that. And I don't think the Skeleton Crew series has started filming, but I know they announced very quickly that they hired the Daniels to direct at least one episode, which again, that might be a knee-jerk reaction, like, oh, right. They won best screenplay, best director, best picture, so let's hire them. But at least since it's for one episode, it sounds more like it's going to happen, because it'd be one thing if they said, oh, they're doing a series. It's like, oh, really? Overnight you made that decision? but I can buy that they'd be on board to be able to get them to direct at least one episode. So that could be something they could maybe have there. Why not? They bring them there to talk about that, because Skeleton Crew, we've been hearing names floated around. We know that some of the cast members are locked, so I don't know if they've started filming yet, but that would be something they could have that might be in the showcase to tease a bit, because at least we know it seems safe that series is probably going to happen, because they've actually had actors signing contracts, whereas a lot of these other announcements they didn't. So that would be something I would predict might come out of Celebration as well. Right.
They've got like the announcement fully for Star Wars Vision season 2, and it is all new studios. But were you thinking like season 3 going forward? Because the Visions format is a fantastic way to just have kind of individual episodes and then just tell really good stories in a short space of time. And I would say that, so it would be fantastic to see a continuation of that idea in giving individual stories to people. And I think that it could be a blueprint for hopefully reminding them, hey, that's what you could do on a bigger scale with films to actually give kind of creative control to one.
But yeah, some of those stories were really good. It's like you could just do an anime feature-length movie of like a Star Wars thing, because if the anime studio is doing it, then they're the ones who are going to be paying for it, and that would be it move into profit sharing. But it's like that would be, because some of those episodes were just great, and the world building they were doing. I mean, I know some
Yeah.
of it technically isn't canon, or some of it might be, but it's like they had some really great episodes that you could expand in there to be good films. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't know if they gave a release date for seasons 2 of Visions. Maybe
And I
if they
think
haven't, that's something they could announce then at Celebration, perhaps.
yeah, August time. I'd heard a few weeks
August, yeah.
back.
Yeah, and I assume they're going to drop all the episodes at once like they did last time.
It would make sense because they're kind of a small format,
Mhm.
which I think is worth then saying on a similar note. Tales of the Jedi was again,
Yeah.
I think, a beautiful present given to fans, and a nice format as well. I think they were just almost, in a way, just teasing by having such a small format, and it would be nice to see longer episodes than the kind of 15-minute type that they took. But that should be a fantastic format that they go with running forward, because you can either pick, Jedi that we know of, or you go to any era in the gigantic timeline of Star Wars, or just take it away from the kind of, the Skywalker saga 6-9 film template, and moving away from that stuff makes it a lot easier to tell original stories, right?
Yeah.
It just gives you more room to breathe, and then you have more free reign for a director like, say, Taika Waititi, or a Ryan Johnson, and just talking in examples, to be able to create something that is its own standalone story that could work.
So you're going to Celebration. What are you looking forward to doing and seeing at Celebration this year?
I'm looking to kind of just take in what I can on the different days. As I said, just to kind of be immersed in the Star Wars galaxy in a fixed location, and to see what's going to be released on the big panels, and see what's going to be available in terms of little experiences that can be. I remember on the VCN previously, people talking about the Mandalorian kind of experience that was available. Those kind of little kind of physical, kind of one-off experiences would be fantastic. And then seeing, the incredible fandom, cosplay, and the creativity of a lot of people would be really cool. And of course, being able to meet some of the VCN, the Virtual Cantina Network, in person, that's a really awesome thing. And that's something that I think is just a fantastic example of why, like, fan communities can be so positive and can connect people and bring people together in a celebratory way, without sounding too cliched, but to just unite people and look at progressive, positive thinking about what we enjoy about Star Wars, and then also looking forward as well as commemorating. And that's the other thing. So you've got a couple of anniversaries with you've got the Clone Wars anniversary being recognized here. You have Return of the Jedi, which is gigantic and such a formative part of a lot of people's Star Wars experience. So that's huge. And being able to take that in, I think, is going to be fantastic for a lot of fans. And yeah, at times when I've been younger, Return of the Jedi has been right up there amongst my favorite Star Wars films, just because of the kind of triumphant feeling that you get in the victory over the Empire. And sure, that is going to be a lot of nostalgia as well, but that's I think it's still one of the better finales to a trilogy in a big franchise, because we've seen a lot of them not by the time the third film comes around, the wheels are off and the wagon is stalled, or the ship has hit the iceberg and it's been a disaster. Like, you've got that happening with the X-Men films, with like Apocalypse, Last Stand, for the third X-Men film, and the original group. You've seen that kind of happen in some parts of the MCU. I think Return of the Jedi will always be one of the great finales to a trilogy, to any film, in fact, that it goes into sequel territory. And I think that's always worth remembering, that it's that's a fantastic element, and that's kind of like modern myth in a way. And Star Wars has almost become that, a modern myth.
Yeah, it's from the monomyth to the modern myth.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
that brings us to the end of the Unifying Force. Be sure to watch Rebels Revisited tomorrow night. They got special guest Philip Anthony Rodriguez, the voice of the fifth brother, who will be joining them. Also, be sure to join members of the virtual cantina for the not so virtual cantina meetup. I believe that is Thursday, April 6th. Don't remember the name of the location, apologize. But that'll be fun. We have information about that all over our show page on Facebook, or our virtual cantina page, I should say, on Facebook. And we will have hook up with the swag crew while you're there in celebration. And just there's plenty of directories. And if you're going by yourself, check out the Obi-Wan Self section on the Virtual Cantina Network Facebook page as well. They will hook you up with how to really navigate celebration if you're a first timer, or if you're just somebody just going by yourself for the first time, maybe that'll help. But yeah, this has been really fun. Our next time will be Thursday, April 9th, or no, excuse me, Sunday, April 9th. Second will be the second Sunday of April, which is during celebration. So we will see if we can get.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's going to be like a maybe like a pause on that week, and yeah,
maybe, because it depends on what Dave's lacrosse schedule looks like as coach. And then you mentioned something about how it's difficult to live stream from the XL Center where the convention's being held, so you might not be able to live stream on the show floor. Then again, given the time change, it might not be. Actually, it should be still open because it would be 4 p.m. there, so I think it would still be going on. But
that's
that might be an issue.
Yeah, I think that's when we'll work on that. I think because on the Virtual Cantina Network, there's going to be the big intergalactic news desk doing reporting from and like summarizing events and announcements from celebration over the 4 days. That's going to be a big part of what they're doing. That's it's actually recording and streaming from convention for itself. I don't think that's a possibility.
All right, so in all likelihood, we will instead be back on Sunday, April 23rd, for a 1 episode for April, which is all right, because that also has a 5th Sunday, so that'll be a short month. But we'll be able to do our own celebration wrap up on the 23rd of April, which will also be the Mandalorian and Bad Batch wrap up as well. So we'll have plenty of content to discuss. So until next time, I'm Cat, joined by Gio, and watch Rebels Revisited again. That'll be really fun. So and Jedi Archives every next Sunday as well. So that'll be fantastic. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, and may the Force be with you. And keep up positivity for celebration and the good Star Wars content we got going forward. Take care.